evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to tonight's edition, kind of a combined show of both Shatter the Darkness and Survive to Thrive. This is a live presentation. It's actually part 5 and part 6 with Tom Horn and myself. It's the 22nd of July. The year is 2010, and we're going to cover a lot of ground, so if you think we're going to be taking a break, we won't be checking or clearing for the next hour, so we're going to get right into it. Tonight we're going to talk about the 72 and the significance of the number 72, and just pretty much what is going on in the world and how late it is in the game. So I want to get right into it. Tom Horn was last week or the week before in Washington, D.C., filming for the History Channel, and I think I'll let Tom tell the story. Obviously, it's his story, and then we'll go into 72. So, Tom, before we go into the number 72, the last time you were in D.C., last week or the week before, talk about your experience, because the heaviness there in the spiritual sense is multiplying, is it not?
Oh, it absolutely is, and I'll tell you maybe the full story a little bit later when we get to talking about the number 72, because it ties directly to what was going on there. But Steve, it was amazing. I mean, I've been in Washington before, and frankly, and I don't mean any disrespect to anybody that lives there, because I know there's a lot of fine Christian people that live in that area, but I always hate going there, and I always feel like I'm driving in under a spiritual cloud. But Steve, I can't even express to you how much this time was worse than anything I had ever expected or had experienced. I hated it. I mean, I literally wanted to just stop in my tracks, turn around, and head the other direction. I wanted to run for the hills, if you will, because it was such an extraordinary darkness, a shadow, an oppression, a heaviness. And the further into Washington I went, the worse it got. Of course, I was praying. I always pray when I go into Washington, D.C., and I certainly was that day. And went and did the shoot with the History Channel, which I may tell you about a little bit later during this show. Then I got back to my motel, and out of the blue, somebody had sent me an article by Ray Gano over at Prophezine, and it was about these, that 100 set deck of cards, that showed the Twin Towers on fire before it actually happened.
The Illuminati card game.
Yeah. Well, one of the cards, I don't even know what Ray was talking about, but one of the cards showed a picture of the U.S. Capitol building, and the name of the card was Plague of Demons. And it showed all these demons that were settling down upon the U.S. Capitol building and there in the Washington Mall, and it just blew me away. I just couldn't hardly wait to get out of town. It just felt like such an enormous, very powerful satanic presence that I mean, it was substantive, though I stutter to try to describe how it felt, Steve.
Well, let's talk about 72, because, Tom, we're doing hours 5 and 6, and obviously the 72, even and thank God for every bit of research that Sue Bradley and others have done, myself, and all those who have contributed. But the thing that's interesting is that we're talking about a number that is so significant to the end times, so significant to the occultists, so much emblazoned in symbology, from the number of bricks on the back of the Great Seal to 72 ladder or rungs on Jacob's ladder. Let's talk from your perspective and all that you've done with your book Apollyon 2012. Why is 72 so important?
All right, and if I can, it'll sound at first like I'm really not tying these two things together. I want to give you just a quick update, if I can, from our first 4 hours.
Sure.
About something that I've been uncovering really at a deeper level in my research, something that I wasn't expecting. I'm working right now on a book called Spiritual Warfare and the Coming Singularity. It kind of goes along with some of what we've been talking about. But our first 4 hours on this subject, we wound up making the point that human enhancement is viewed by some in military think tanks now as part of the next arms race, right?
Yep.
So following those 4 hours, I decided to go back and review a couple of the government reports on the future and what they were anticipating as far back as 2002. There was this National Science Foundation, and the U.S. Department of Commerce published a government report. It was a commissioned government report called Converging Technologies for Improving Human Performance. Now, I had read this, of course, a few years ago, but with everything we had been talking about, you said some things and some thoughts came back to my mind. I thought, I'm going to go back and read this report again. It's almost 500 pages, so I kind of quick read it. It's got diagrams, bullet points, But what's amazing about it is in 2002 how the U.S. government actually laid out the blueprint for the radical evolution of man and machine. People can go who want to on the internet and look that up. Converging technologies for improving human performance. They can download it in PDF and they can read it. But what's amazing about it, Steve, and this, again, in a little while we'll tie this to the number 72, when you read the government's vision, they imagined that starting around the year 2012, now isn't that an interesting time frame, that human enhancement would lead to, here are some of the bullet points, the transhuman body being more durable, healthy, energetic, easier to repair, resistant to many kinds of stress, biological threats, aging processes. Here's another bullet point. Brain-machine interfacing, transforming work in factories, controlling automobiles, ensuring military superiority. There's that arms race super soldier aspect again. Here's another bullet point. Factories will start to be organized around increased human-machine integration. So, and I think we're not really too far off their target with what we're seeing right now developing in Grim Tech, like we talked about in those first 4 hours. Here they were a decade ago imagining that around the year 2012, this would begin to unfold. And that list, of course, goes on. There's 500 pages of it. People can go and download that, read the report. But here's the interesting part, how human augmentation and biological reinvention would begin spreading into the wider culture following 2012. This report details global economic aspects of genetically superior humans beginning to act in genetically superior ways, and as a result of this grim techno-sapien DNA upgrading, the report concludes, quote, the 21st century could end in world peace, universal prosperity, and evolution to a higher level as humanity becomes like a single transcendent nervous system, an interconnected brain based in new core pathways of society, end quote. You would think that that was a quote from some New Age psychobabble, but it comes right out of a commissioned government report, and actually a report by two of the largest departments of the United States, the National Science Foundation and the United States Department of Commerce. So going back and reading that really reminded me of where some of this started, and I wanted to recommend to people to get that report, because what it shows, Steve, is that this is not like, we just kind of stumbled into this and we can't help it, and what's being echoed in military halls now is, well, if our enemies get ahead of the game, the Jason's saying that if brain-enhanced modified foes start developing, it's forcing our hand, it's making, but what this report illustrates is that this has been a carefully laid out blueprint that the government has done and has been funding. And okay, so here's where this starts getting interesting. There are also newer reports I'll be sharing with the public soon that support what I'm now documenting, and that is related to these the human enhancement development as it relates to the government's interest in super soldier technology, and what, Steve, to the point, what you and I would think of as receptacles for resurrected spirits of the Nephilim. I bet you, unknown to almost all Americans, is information based around a series of hushed events following the sacking of Admiral John Poindexter. You remember him?
Absolutely.